hope you're well. It feels like it's been a while since I've done one of these, but it's only been a few weeks. I hope you've had a lovely summer. I hope you've enjoyed some of the sunshine, if you managed to get any. And I hope you're well. I'm back with this month's series, and we are thinking all about Jesus. We're going to look at the world of Jesus that he was part of, Jesus and wealth, popular views on Jesus, and the Lord's Prayer. So essentially, I've split the 4 weeks of the month into Jesus and the law for 2 weeks, and Jesus, making sense of Jesus, basically, for 2 weeks. So hopefully, my hope is that by the end of this month, of this series, we will have thought about Jesus, maybe learnt some new things about Jesus that we didn't know before, dug a little bit deeper in our own time into Jesus to get that excitement going, to want to learn more and to research and to find out new things, to shape our view on who Jesus was and all of these things. I hope that by the end you'll be passionate and excited to be doing that. And maybe as a consequence of learning new things, living a bit differently, doing different things, making different choices as a result of things we've thought about and talked about and learnt about. Fingers crossed. So starting off week 1, when I say Jesus to you, what comes to mind? If you think about Jesus, who do you think of? I'm sure all of us have different thoughts and feelings and opinions on who Jesus is, whether you are a follower of Jesus or you're not, whether you consider yourself to be a Christian or not, whether you've followed Jesus for a long time or a short time, or you're just thinking about it, or you have no interest whatsoever. Everyone has an opinion on Jesus and who he was and his teachings, and has done for a lot of years throughout history. So when you think about Jesus, what do you think about? Often the things that I have heard, and that I'm sure maybe you have as well, was, people see Jesus as, he was a carpenter, so he was strong physically, mentally, spiritually, because he is fully God, fully man, all of these things. Or people go the other way and they're like, oh, sweet baby Jesus, meek and mild, cute little baby. Could be one of those two, how you see Jesus. Often our Western artwork depicts white Jesus with blue eyes and light brown hair. Is that how you see Jesus? Is that the image that comes to mind when I say, tell me about Jesus? Is it more that you don't really think about his physical form, that you think about more his teachings, or how following Jesus makes you feel, or the peace that it brings to know Jesus? Have a think about it, because I think it matters. I think it all matters. I think our perception of Jesus is really important. And I think if we believe that Jesus was fully God and fully man, if we take what they'd call the incarnation seriously, that we have to try to understand and appreciate Jesus, not just for who we think he is based on what we have learned or what we have read or the images that we've seen, but based on the reality of who he was, the world that he lived in, what he was part of, what he believed in, not just what we imagine it to be. And our traditional Western view of Jesus may have distorted that a little bit, and a few of the facts about that. And we have to be aware of that, and we have to hold that as an important way that it's shaped how we think about Jesus. We can't just pretend that it hasn't. We can't just pretend that our culture and teaching and history hasn't had an impact or played a part in how we see Jesus, because it has. And it doesn't mean that we're right or we're wrong. We just need to think about these things, which is partly why I thought this series would be really exciting and really good. But I think the more advanced the world gets, the more things we discover, the more that we know, it's not a bad thing. It's not a threat. It's nothing to be scared of. We can learn from it, and it is exciting. Jesus was a Jew. You probably know that already. But recent studies in the last decade, maybe, when I was having a look researching for this, archaeology, anthropology, sociology, all of these things that have really kind of blown up and explored so many different aspects of history, including the time of Jesus, can help us to understand much more about the historical approaches of Judaism at the time, to help us understand and to give us a more accurate understanding of what he did and who he was. So if you have time, now would be a really good time to pause the video. Just really quickly, if you're watching it as a group, you can do this together, but pause the video and just have a really quick Google for 2 minutes, different images of Jesus, different artwork of Jesus. There is some beautiful and some beautifully diverse images that people have created, that they have used art to depict their view of Jesus. And it's fascinating to me, and it's incredible, and it's beautiful. And I love to look at what Jesus looks like to different cultures. If I was clever with technology, I would have put a few example pictures up here now and done it for you, but I don't know how to do that. Maybe Doug would know how to do that. I have to ask him for next time. But because I don't know how to do that, pause it now and just spend a few minutes Googling different artworks. Study the pictures. Think about or talk about, if you're watching it as a group, because I know some of you do kind of do it as a weekly group thing, and talk about the differences, the similarities in the pictures that you find. What do you relate to and why? What is significant about them? What is the image trying to reflect? What matters about them? Have a little chat about it, because I think it will be interesting what you will find from doing that. And it will be helpful to maybe not change your view of Jesus, but to go, okay, well, this culture or this country have painted Jesus like this, or this person's included a lamb, or this person's included this, that, and the other, a crown, or whatever it could be. So pause it and then come back. I also love this kind of thing. So again, next time you see me, or if I'm talking in person, find me, tell me what you discovered and spoke about, and I love to hear it. So do that and then press play. So if you're back now, we're carrying on. If you didn't pause it, that's probably awkward to watch, so sorry about that. But it's interesting to challenge our view and our perception of Jesus. I think it's healthy to do that. I think we can all be guilty of either not thinking too much about his physical form, or boxing in one image of Jesus and never changing it. And I think it's important to constantly, like the Bible says, renew our mind, think differently about things, let the Holy Spirit change you and guide you and change your thoughts on things, and that's okay. So let's try and find out together a little bit more about who Jesus is, where he lived, who he coexisted with, who he lived amongst. The Gospels are really obviously helpful for this. So the Gospels tell us quite a bit about Jesus, that he grew up in Nazareth, but he was also known in Jerusalem. Nazareth was a small town or a large village within the province of Galilee. So again, all of these names, you'll start to be like, yes, I read those. Yes, I know that's mentioned in the Bible. However, I am not great at understanding or visualizing these things often, and I just think it is helpful to know this information, to visualize more clearly the world that the Gospels are talking about and that Jesus was part of. It's similar essentially to living in Andreas, if you lived in Nazareth, close to Ramsey, and part of the north of the Isle of Man as the province. It just helps. It helps me anyway, to try and picture a little bit more and not just read it, but not really fully understand or appreciate these little things. To add to this, if you were from Galilee, the Jews of Jerusalem were really suspicious of you. So again, that adds another layer in, that maybe if we don't know that when we approach the text, we will not fully get that from that as much. We will not read it with that lens on and pick up on some of the nuance or the things, or not have that depth of understanding to know that was going on at the culture of the time. There were different groups of Jews to be part of, different groups of people in society to be part of, and much like we have different denominations within Christianity, there were many different groups of people at the time, including for the Jews. And Jerusalem was the political and religious capital, so the Douglas of the time of Jesus. And again, it's really important that we know this, and that it does change kind of how we approach the text and what we can draw out of it and what we can understand from it. So that's really good. Again, history might not be your bag, and that is fine. But I do still think it is really important to get as much as we can out of the Bible, out of the text, and to understand it as best as we can. So I hope if history isn't your thing, you're not bored listening to this, but you can pick up bits that will be of interest to you, or that will just help you understand passages a little bit better with new information involved. So Jesus was circumcised like other Jews at the time, and then he was taken to Jerusalem, so the religious and political capital. And within the temple, it's later described within the text that Jesus spent time engaging with the teachers of the temple. So he was taken there to be presented within the temple, which the culture would have said to do. And then as he grew up and later on, he was kind of involved with the teachers of the temple. So this tells us that Jesus was physically and culturally embedded into the heart of the Jewish society and faith. He wasn't just a kind of passive watcher of society, not involved in the world that he lived in at the time. He was actively involved in and grew up in the culture and the faith and participated in it like others would have at the time. Some of the other groups of people that we may be familiar with, and who Jesus would have been very familiar with and encountered often and lived with, were people like Pharisees, scribes, teachers of the law, Sadducees, priests, tax collectors, and the poor. And often when we read passages about Jesus, there's also the referring to the crowd of people. Again, I am guilty of, I'm only going to speak for myself, skimming over these often, being like, yep, Pharisees, Sadducees, all pretty much the same, teachers of the law, yeah. But actually, there are some huge differences within each of these groups of people. Some were powerful figures in society, and others were thought of as absolute nobodies. But very often in the Gospels, when we read them, their worlds overlap in the accounts. And often we read that Jesus's interactions with the powerful religious groups within that society were confrontational. They were not peaceful exchanges of encouraging harmony and unity. They were not. It was often confrontation. They were often trying to catch Jesus out. And actually, I find it incredibly interesting that some of Jesus' harshest words ever spoken and recorded were to the religious, powerful figures, not to the poor, not to the ones that were considered by the religious groups as the nobodies. Actually, his harshest words were for the religious and the powerful figures within the communities. So a passage that I think is helpful for us to read, or that includes a few of these groups in one passage, is in Mark. So it's in the Gospel of Mark, and it's Mark 12, 13 to 28. It's quite a chunk of passage, so like I usually do in these videos, pause it and have a read and then come back. And if you have a read of that passage, you'll hopefully begin to understand why it helps us to have this knowledge of who these groups were, what their beliefs were, what their behaviours were like, how they viewed other people in society, how they viewed Jesus. It's really important, and each one may be slightly different. And hopefully you will see it's vastly different to the world that we live in now. It's two completely different worlds, and words like Pharisees become so familiar without us ever really understanding very much about them. So the significance of Pharisees developing and applying the laws of Moses, but losing political influence to the Sadducees is completely missed, or it was on me. I would have no idea from just reading the text that really happened. And I think when you lift passages out and read them in isolation without this other knowledge of the world that Jesus was part of, we miss so much. So hopefully you understand why I'm going over this and why it's important, because there is so much depth to the Bible, so much further reading, so much history and culture, so much further study that we can do to try to understand this beautiful and clever book full of wisdom and knowledge and life lessons and incredible upside down kingdom of God that it talks about. But there's just so much depth to it that we will not always get at face value from the text. We are forever having to unlearn and relearn things that may have been taught to us incorrectly or understood incorrectly, that now we have new information that we found, like I said, from archaeology and all these different studies of humanity at the time, that we know more information now and we can research it in a different way. And that's exciting. And it's the same with our view of Jesus. There may be some things that we need to unlearn and to go and relearn, and we're not doing anything wrong in that, but we're going, okay, I was taught this, however, I can kind of read this and this, which explains to me that this was part of Jesus's culture and this would have influenced why he said this in this way, or why he used this analogy for this. It's fascinating, and there's just so much to it. I think his Jewish heritage, his culture, the political and religious groups that were around at the time and that he was surrounded by, how they influenced the view of Jesus, how he was impacted by their perception of Jesus, how it impacted his life journey, and ultimately how it influenced his death. And I would argue that all of this matters, that it's all really important. And so my challenge for us this week, as I bring this now to a close, is for us to dig a little bit deeper. I'm really sorry if you feel like I have just given you a taste this week of some of this, that I have just skimmed over stuff. But I really think it is worth our personal investment of time and energy to dig deeper ourselves. I could sit and tell you information that I have researched in preparation for this 18-minute or whatever this will end up being message. However, you will absorb it and then it's gone, or you'll remember a bit of it and then it's gone. I think it's really important for us to take the time and invest the time to study and dig deeper ourselves. And that is our challenge this week, to find out some more. I've given you a taste of it, and now it's over to you to see what you can learn. See what can you learn about Jesus. See what can you learn about the groups mentioned in the passage or in what I've said. What else can you learn about them? What have you never known about Pharisees that you are dying to know now, and a fact that you think, wow, I can't wait to share that and tell people about that because I never knew that before? What evidence can you find to give you an idea of how they perceived Jesus, or how Jesus perceived them? How was Jesus different to them? That is huge. That is significant. And that is helpful for us now as a follower of Jesus when we think about what he said to those who followed the law religiously, or what does that mean for us now? Have a read of the Gospels. Make a list of all the groups mentioned in the Gospel. I've only mentioned a handful. There's a lot more that maybe even came to your mind when I was saying it. Write them all down. What do you want to know about them? Think about the different groups of people. And then, because I like it to be practical for now, think about all the different groups of people in your own life now. Think about who is in your world, in your culture, in your circle. Pray for them. And pray for each other, and take the time to do that. Enjoy researching it and reading and discovering a little bit more about Jesus and the world that he lived in. And then next week, we will have a little look at Jesus and his attitude to wealth. again, get ahead of it. Have a read, see what you can find out before I bring what I'm going to bring. And have a great week. I can't wait to hear all about what you found out. Feel free to send me an email of the stuff, because I'm forever learning and I love it and I'm here for it. But hopefully that's just given you a little taste of the world that Jesus was part of. And now over to you to go and see what else you can find out about it. See you next week.